Welcome to Story Chats at Inspy Romance. I'm Elizabeth Madry, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Narelle Atkins.
I'm Valerie Comer, and this is Cooney.
Yes. Hi, Cooney. That's the best looking one that we got going.
She's
She
adorable.
won't last long, I'm sure.
So happy New Year. Hopefully you all had a lovely New Year's celebration. Mine is typically going to bed early and then waking up the next day going, yay. So that's how we party. But maybe you did something more interesting than that. We thought that we would kick off the new reading year by talking a little bit about some of the bookish people things like reading challenges and Goodreads and all of that sort of, how do you organize your new year of reading? As people do. I'm told people do this.
Some people.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I kind of wish that we were just like all hanging out somewhere where you guys could talk back to us. And we could have like a real honest to goodness chat about this, because I suspect that the three of us are probably fairly similar in how we approach this, or maybe not. Valerie says no. Valerie's like, no, but so I'm sure there are like 600 other ways and other things that could be done that we will not touch. So for sure, be in the comments when all is said and done, and let us know, because we are by no means an exhaustive list here. We're just talking about how we do it because we're readers. We're definitely readers in addition to authors. So let's talk Goodreads first. Hopefully everybody knows what Goodreads is. It is a website, goodreads.com. It is owned by Amazon. It didn't start out owned by Amazon, but it was purchased by Amazon. You can do all sorts of bookish things there. So let's talk about how the three of us use Goodreads. First, that'll be the fun thing. Let's start there. Narelle, do you use Goodreads? And if so, how?
Well, in recent years, I probably haven't really used Goodreads. I think it's different when you're an author compared to when you're a reader with Goodreads as well. Yeah. And probably I have my Kindle account linked up to Goodreads. So when I get to the end of a book, a 5-star review goes to Goodreads, because if I finish a book, it's a 5-star book. I don't actually finish all the books I start reading. And so I don't think that's actually how you're meant to rate things at Goodreads. So I'm probably a bad Goodreads user by doing that. But then if I do hit that button and put it into the red column, I've got somewhere I know that I have actually read a book. So I wish Goodreads had have existed 30 years ago, because I would have been able to keep track of all those print books that you borrow from the library and can't remember if you've read it. I think having ebooks, particularly I usually buy from Kindle primarily, I'm able to track what I'm doing there. And occasionally I will put a review up on Goodreads if someone twists my arm, but it's not sort of something I sort of think to do, if that makes sense. Okay. So it kind of exists over there in the corner. And actually, the thing I probably like about Goodreads is if I'm looking for a book I've read and it's in a box set and that collection no longer exists, Goodreads archives absolutely everything anyone's ever published. And it also has all the different editions. So if you've got a cover that's changed, you can actually go to Goodreads and look at the history of that as well. So I probably find it as a research tool more helpful than a reading tool, which is probably not the right answer, but that's me.
It's a very authory answer, so, which is not wrong because you are an author. So yeah. That works. Valerie, do you use Goodreads for anything?
Not really.
Okay. Not at all. Not really.
I make sure that my new releases show up there.
Okay.
And if somebody comments there or tags me, then I go and say hello. Otherwise, I don't use it as a reader really at all.
Okay, so I'm sort of surprised. I do use it somewhat as a reader, but I know I don't use it to its full capability. I love the fact that it is linked to my Kindle. I do finish every book I start. It takes like, it has to be bad like really, really bad for me to DNF something. I finish what I start, by golly. So there are times when I'm like swiping on the Kindle angrily, like, let's go. But I'm gonna finish that book, by golly, because I started it. So
So for our reader or our listeners who might not know what DNF is, that's
yeah.
a did not finish, DNF.
Yeah,
So if you
DNF.
DNF something, you give up before the end.
Right. And I'm not
Yep.
saying that mine is the healthiest way to be. Okay, not to finish reading books, but not in my world. So so I do use I use Goodreads to track my books that I've read, to keep track of them, which beats all the random little sticky notes that I used to use. And then I had a notebook for a while, but I would always lose it. So then I'd have like 6 notebooks with like 3 books written in it was terrible. So Goodreads does that for me, which I love. I do not rank or review books in general, mostly because I got chewed out by another author because I gave her book 4 stars, and she considered that incredibly insulting and was very angry, even though my review was really nice. And she like blasted me on social media and got all of her followers to go be really ugly to me in the comments of my review. So I was kind of done leaving reviews at that point. I'm like,
People
I'm
wonder
out.
why authors shouldn't review for other authors.
Yeah.
This is why people, one of
This
the
is,
reasons.
yeah. And so I was like, I'm good so I don't review anything. So you can see a list of what I've read, but you don't know how I felt about any of my books, especially because I finish everything I start. And honestly, if I do DNF something, I delete it out of Goodreads because I don't want it to people think, I don't know. So I do delete things out of Goodreads if I didn't finish it. So that list of what I've read is actually accurate.
That's hilarious.
Goodreads has some groups for book discussion and genres and that kind of thing. I have poked around in there. I haven't ever commented or participated, but there are, like, if you've ever thought to yourself, gosh, I wish there were groups of just book people sitting around talking books, they're on Goodreads, and they're a little easier to find on Goodreads than on Facebook.
Yep. And I used to be an admin. So when I was publishing with Harlequin for their Heart Song Presents line, that would have been 2014, 2015, we actually set up a Goodreads group because it was just so convenient. You'd have 4 books would come out every month, and then you just have an author would take a week and you just talk about a book a week. So I think in that sense, I think that was probably in the early days of Goodreads before it was taken over by Amazon. And I think it was quite a nice sort of discussion, chatty place. But I think authors often need to tread warily in terms of what they do on Goodreads as well, for reasons you mentioned. And you're not allowed to have a DNF bookshelf on Goodreads either. That's a big no-no.
Yep.
And there's I think it's like there needs to be an etiquette book on how to use Goodreads so that you don't accidentally step on a landmine as well. Yeah.
I also like to add books to my want to read shelf. When I know that a book is coming out soon, I'll go find it on Goodreads and add it to my want to read shelf. And what I love about doing that, and only have I recently realized that actually helps authors. When you add something to your want to read shelf, then in the Goodreads news feed for all the people that are connected to you, it shows like Elizabeth Madry wants to read, and it puts a little picture of the cover and a little description. So then your friends are saying, ooh, that looks interesting. And then they can add it to their want to read. And so then when I get to a place where I'm like, what should I read next? I will go check my want to read shelf, which I mean,
how long is that shelf? Does it sort of like, what's it like? How many, in terms of what you're putting into it compared to what you're actually pulling out of it to read?
Right this red hot second, there's only 2 books on it. Because all of the ones that had been on it have now come out. So they're now on my Kindle, which is my next step, TBR. Once I get the book, the TBR is the listing on my Kindle, not my Goodreads shelf. I have a complicated system. I don't necessarily recommend my complicated system for everyone. There are also giveaways on Goodreads, and I've gotten some some free ebooks that way, which has been fun. Sometimes you can get them a little ahead of publication. Like if you want, especially with traditionally published books, if you're too cheap, buy the ebook at $14.99 like me. Sometimes you can get them through a Goodreads giveaway, which I like.
They open internationally, because I know most of the Goodreads giveaways, I remember being print book, were primarily US only. So I sort of didn't really pay attention a lot to Goodreads giveaways.
Now that they're doing ebook giveaways, those are for sure. I'm almost 100% sure they're international. And I have seen actually more and more print books being open internationally.
Okay.
I think they realized that, you know, there's more to the world than the United States. Who knew?
I thought it was postage. I actually thought the problem was postage, because I mean the rest of the world doesn't have media mail that's very affordable. Yeah,
I think because Amazon took it over, maybe I don't know if they handle it, like the shipping, and so if they're handling it, maybe they can afford international shipping more than.
Are you telling me they run the post office too?
Well, no, but like they handle the distribution of the prizes.
I'm teasing.
I don't know. For all I know, they do own. I don't know, but so that's the other thing. The main thing that I use it for, and then the thing that I really like is Goodreads has the ability to set like a reading goal for the year, and so it ties in with the books that you're tracking on Goodreads. So like I tend to set myself a reading goal of about 200 books in a year, which is a fairly achievable book goal for me. I usually surpass it by 10 or 15 books, but I like my goals to be easily achievable. I don't like them to be stretching. So I'll set that. And then as it tracks the books as I read them, it keeps track on my goal as well. And then at the end of the year, when you complete your goal, you get this cool thing that you can share on your social media with all the covers of the books that you read that year, which is fun. So, and a little nerdy. Valerie's looking at me like I've lost my mind, but it's fun.
I think I'm too introverted for Goodreads. Like I don't want the whole world to know what I'm reading necessarily. And particularly if it's going to be a do not finish, which I never quite know. And usually from the sample, I know whether I'm going to keep going or not, but not necessarily. And so some things I think are better kept private. And to me, I don't necessarily want the whole world to know absolutely everything I'm reading and what I'm doing and where I'm up to, but that might be a Narelle quirk and I might be just weird.
I would say there have been times I've been a little hesitant because I write Christian romance. That's all I write. I read a whole bunch of other stuff. I read secular romance. I read science fiction. I read fantasy, I read mystery, I like cozies. And so what I read is a weird jumble of all kinds of things. And some of them would make some of the more strictly conservative, I only read Christian fiction published by traditional publishers because then I know for sure that I'm not going to see a word that I consider bad. Would make them arch their eyebrows at me, but I mean, it's who I am and I read widely and I love Jesus. And I don't think that the two things are in conflict with one another. So I had a few moments when I started writing about using Goodreads to track my books, but I'm like, you know what? I'm a reader and this is what I read. And if people don't want to read my books because I read other books that they would not approve of, that's not a me problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. What's Valerie thinking?
I'm thinking this whole concept of having a goal for how many books you read and stuff is like, just no, completely no. Because I use goals and rewards and whatever in my business.
Sure.
And when I read, it's not for work.
Sure.
It's for fun. It's my hobby. It's for relaxing. It's not for comparative study as to what this author is doing or whatever. I don't, until this last year, I never kept a list at all of what I read. If you would have said you read 200 books, I'd have gone, huh, I might read 100. I might read 300. I have no idea. I don't know. Wait. Probably averages to a couple a week, maybe. I don't know. And part of it, honestly, I've only started keeping track at all, and you'll laugh because it's definitely not Goodreads, is because I need a way to keep track of what we're doing for this podcast. When you say, oh, let's do, what are some of the ones that we're going to do in January, right? We're going to talk about bookish people. We're going to talk about contractors. What's something else we're going to talk about? And I'm like, I read for fun.
Yeah.
I don't read for like, oh, how did they handle this trope? Or what do they do with bookish people? I don't read that way. And so it's been pretty challenging for me. And I could use some tips, honestly, on how to set that up without it becoming one more job.
To be fair, I don't read for any of that either. I set a goal. Like I said, it's one that I know I'm going to hit. So it's not like it's a goal that this is on average what I read in a year. So
for the record, I tipped over 150 last night.
Woohoo! See?
So
and so that's the thing. Like, I know that I'm gonna read about this many. So it's an easy thing to be like, okay, fine. It's not that I'm going to make sure that I hit this. It's that I'm going to hit it as a matter of course. So I might as well get the cool collage at the end of it.
Sure.
So, and for me, it's kind of fun to see, like, it's been fun to see how, I'm like 12 books ahead right now. And so, they tell you if you read one book a week for the rest of the year, then you'll make your goal, or, 3 books. I don't know, it's interesting, but it's not because maybe it's interesting because I'm a big nerd. I don't know. I'll own it. I'm nerdly. But I'm not keeping track of, I'm not doing analysis. Like, I left that behind in lit class in college. I don't want to compare and contrast the Scarlet Letter with the Rime of the Ancient Mariner ever again in my life.
That is the worst poem. I had to analyze that for my final year at school. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm
so old.
Albatross. I wanted to wrap that albatross around everybody's neck.
Right. And it's like, okay, the albatross and the Scarlet A have similarities. Whoopee.
Yeah.
They're both terrible stories. So just, that's not why I'm reading either. I think you can track your books and have a goal. I'm making air quotes if you're not on YouTube, without necessarily doing it for competition. Now, I'm sure there are people who are competitive about it because people are people. So, but that's not why I do it.
They're not the same people who are competitive volleyball players.
No.
They're competitive readers.
Yeah. And I mean, I know there are readers out there who they're like 200 books. I did that by March. And it's like, okay, good for you. That's awesome.
And I'm like, okay, I don't really care. That's nice. And I mean, I don't count the books. I mean, I'm like Val, very much in the same camp. And, reading is a hobby and it's for fun. And I don't want to lock myself into having to meet a target, because then it becomes stressful and it becomes like work, and it's like life is too short to work all the time. But what I do try to do is I try to do 50 book recommendations a year. Okay. So 1 a week for my blog. So that's the only thing I'm probably counting. And sometimes I might do 2. But as to how many books I would actually start in a year or read in a year, I have absolutely no idea, other than the fact it's over 50. And I really don't, and I'm really not particularly interested in counting. It's just not the way I roll, if that makes sense. But I can understand why people really enjoy that. And so it depends on how you're wired as well. Yeah. Some people are wired to find that really interesting, and they're motivated to keep going because they've got this goal and this target. Whereas that's just not how my mindset works when it comes to reading. But I do like to try and track what I've read in terms of themes. And that's, as Val was saying with the podcast, is because we know we're talking about different topics and themes. I'm very good at tagging my book recommendations quite succinctly.
Yep.
So I can find stuff and remember stuff.
So
yeah.
I would never have been jealous of your book recommendation blog before. But now I kind of halfway am, because I don't remember. I don't even necessarily, it sounds terrible. A book has to be quite out of the ordinary, not just a good book, but it has to have, it needs to be really fresh and different for me to remember it for more than a few weeks.
Sure.
Yeah.
In that way sometimes too. Yeah. There are books I'm like, you guys will mention something. I'm like, oh, I read that. But right.
I don't remember that part. Yeah.
So I just adapted my system for the podcast, and basically and even the way I write a book recommendation now, I tend to be more story focused and keyword focused, just so that when I go searching, it'll jog my memory about elements of the story that I will remember. And I would never, ever remember that unless I had triggered something in my brain to try and join the dots, because I have amnesia when it comes to books. And if you read, the more books you read, the less you retain, is my theory. And it's like if you have, it's like if you ate a donut every day, would you remember which donut on which day was the best one? So that's kind of, donuts are donuts. Yeah, books are books. Yeah.
So another readers do, and this is not something that I participate in, and I'm guessing from our conversation none of you do either, neither of you, but maybe our readers, our listeners would be interested in. I know like avid readers of Christian fiction, which is a Facebook group for Christian fiction readers. Shockingly, based on the title, big surprise. They do annual / monthly reading challenges where it's like, read a book that has a key on the cover, or, they'll give you 30 or 5 or whatever. It's probably not 30 because that'd be a book a day. And I don't think they're that crazy in there, but they are avid. They'll give you a list of, read a book by an author who's new to you, or read a book by an indie author, or read they give you these suggestions to sort of jog your to mix up what you're reading and get you out of, if you feel like you're in a reading slump. There are some other there are some blogs around who also have them. There is and I didn't write down her name, and now I was like, I'm never going to forget who it is because everybody always talks about it, and I've completely forgot who it is. But there's one fairly well-known and memorable blogger.
Is it Reading Is My Superpower?
No.
Okay.
But
I didn't know. That's just the first bookie blog that came to mind.
I'll keep talking. We might work it out.
Anyway, she a reading challenge every year as well. She has like 3 different levels, like if you're new to reading challenges, or medium level, and then like hardcore. And so she'll incorporate things like, a nonfiction book on apologetics, to try and encourage you to really broaden your reading horizons outside of even fiction. But, is a challenge like that something that you would ever be interested in participating in? I know we talked at one point of having, we actually even tried in the Christian Romance Reader Gathering, which is our reader group for Inspi Romance. We tried a reading challenge one year, and nobody participated. So I just quit. I'm like, unpin that post, just move on. Let's pretend that
DNF.
Yeah, we DNF'd that whole reading challenge because it just did not seem to take off. Possibly because it's not something that really I was all excited about, so I wasn't selling it properly, because I want to read what I want to read when I want to read it. Narelle, Valerie?
Same.
Well, I think I think I'm the same. Although I suppose if we had readers that like commented on like the YouTube episode or somewhere and said, I'd really like you to find to see if you can come up with a book that is on something quirky or weird. I think I could do an episode, maybe one a year. If our readers were interested in us trying to locate
Like a reader's
things.
choice episode.
Yeah, reader's
Okay.
choice. Find a quirky. It would be a quirky episode basically. So I would do that. But I'm like you. I like to read what I want to read, and sometimes it's like the most impulsive 2-second decision that I just happen to come across something on social media or on a blog. I'm reading something and, oh, that's right, I remember that book I wanted to read, and then I'll just go find it and open it so I don't forget that I had that momentary moment of wanting to read it, because my brain, it's very easy to forget something. Yeah, and so I'll go open the Kindle app and tag that book to make sure it's showing up in the library and is downloaded, and I'll read it. So there's sort of no logic behind what I read. So it's kind of, I don't necessarily want to get sort of put into a box of having to read a book set in New Zealand and then read a book that has a snowman in it and then read. Yeah, but I think it would be fun for an episode if we had readers that were very keen to throw some random stuff at us.
That would be fun.
I'd be up for that challenge. Yeah.
I think part of it is that hosting this podcast is a reading challenge all on its own.
It kind of is.
Because we
Yes.
do set the topics up to a few months in advance, and then we put it out to our Inspi Romance authors, and they go, oh, I want to join in with that one, which is why we often have them for guests. And then other times it's just us.
Those are the topics that are crickets. It's like
sometimes, and sometimes we don't even invite them. I don't think we invited anybody for this one.
We did not. No.
But and then so I'm seeing topics that are going to be coming up, and I'm like, oh, what books have I read? And then I might be digging out books and or buying a few or digging through my very poorly laid out back memory.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a reading challenge on its own as we kind of work through that and plan to have enough titles to talk about every week.
Yeah.
So that's all the reading challenge I can handle at one time.
Yeah. Like I read 3 love triangle books in a week to prep for our love triangle episode. And if you watch,
and you don't love triangles.
I don't. If you watch,
that was your bed of
Instagram
nails
stories,
week.
my Instagram stories that week were full of my reaction to reading love triangles all week. I was like, oh, y'all, this is terrible. The books were good, but
poor angsty Beth.
I know. I just want everybody to get along. That's all I ask. Can't we just all get along?
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, readers though, like, there is a class of reader, I think, who really seems to enjoy those challenges. I guess, because it does break up, if you feel like you're in a rut, or maybe you're someone who is often at a loss for what to read, which is not a problem that I tend to struggle with. So
it does give direction. So how many books are in the world? I mean, how many million of books are we up to that are available? And
7
some
or 8.
people, pardon?
7 or 8.
7 or 8 million, I believe.
Yes. And so you've got this world of 7 or 8 million books. And some people have trouble making decisions if there's anything more than this or that. And I know, like my son, like he will get completely overwhelmed and so do nothing because it's just too hard. If you've got a menu in a restaurant that's got too many items on it, he finds that really difficult. So I think if you find making decisions and trying to hone down and pick something to read really hard, then I think those reading challenges where you've got to find a specific attribute would be very appealing.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. And I mean, I will say, like, Narelle, you've mentioned Meredith Resky's books on the podcast, and I had never heard of her until you mentioned her. And I did go and read the first of the Luella Lindley matchmaking mom series, and I want to read the rest of them, and I never would have found them but for your mention. So reading challenges can be a way maybe to get recommendations. If you say, you have to read a book that's pink, you can go to a group of readers and be like, suggest to me a book with a pink cover, or you go to the library and you scan the options. It's not like that would be challenging. You can't go to Amazon probably and put in pink cover, but
Maybe. I've never tried.
Yeah, I haven't either. But in a physical library, you could go and scan the shelves, or if you asked someone, that sort of thing might open up. Because basically a way to get recommendations for a specific thing that maybe you might not otherwise have found.
And if you have a book, like sometimes, as I say, I do DNF a lot of books. And sometimes I think I can be too quick to judge a book as well. And so if I hear you, or if I hear like either of you guys talking about a book and raving about a book, I'm like, well, maybe I should give this book a chance and not just be so judgy at the very beginning. As well. So for people it is
true. There's been times when I have started a book and I've gone, seriously? But then so-and-so said it was really good. You just need to get past the first few chapters. Okay, well, how many is the first few chapters? Because I'm really not feeling it. And then later on, I'm like, yeah, it was. I did enjoy it. So that can definitely happen. We do influence each other. Not just we three, but readers influence each other all the time by what we say about the book.
And it's a time of day. Like sometimes I can pick up a book and it's perfect for now. And that same book I could have picked up a month earlier. I mean, like, it's the last thing I feel like reading right now. So I think our moods and emotions and what's happening in our lives and all that kind of stuff sort of mix is like being in a big mixing bowl in the background that determines our state of mind in terms of what we want to read as well. I mean,
just where we are. Like in August, I know I went through quite a few books where they're not DNF because I'm going to finish them, but they are put aside for a little while because it was like every time it's like cancer, next book, cancer. I'm like, I can't deal with cancer books right now. That's not in my world. I can't deal with cancer books right now. So no, thank you. I'll come back to you when I can read a cancer book. But it's like it feels like sometimes like when you're trying to avoid a certain thing, it's like that's all the book recommendations you get. And you're like, really? It's not what I want.
And I will give books I've DNF'd a second go. So if you've heard me talk about A Season to Dance by Patricia Bill, I picked that up and I could not read it. The first time I tried to read it, it was put aside for a couple of months and I picked it up. And at that time, I loved it. So it's just so subjective, reading is. It's just, I mean, even myself, I'm torn and twisted about what I like and don't like, let alone anything else. Yeah.
Speaking of reading challenges for our viewers or podcast listeners, is there a book that you DNF'd, but you came back to later and found that you really enjoyed it? If you've got a title like that, we'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's Christian romance.
Yep. No, that's a great thing. I was going to say we could do an episode, but it's not a super positive episode, so maybe not.
No, I don't want to talk about the books I DNF'd.
Books I couldn't read the first time I tried is not really exciting.
That would be a psychology on the couch session for all our neuroses. On that day, I couldn't read this book because this and this and this had happened. And I don't think all our listeners really want to hear about all our neuroses.
No, they don't. They don't. I stopped myself halfway through the sentence. So I was like, no, let's not go there. We would like to know if you what do you use Goodreads? Do you set a goal? Do you feel pressured by that goal if you set it, or is it just a way to sort of track the fun that you do? Do you like reading challenges? Maybe what reading challenges you've been part of, and what was fun about them? Just that sort of thing, because obviously they exist and people love them. Not these three people apparently, but they do. And I mean, if there was we'd love to have, I think the reader's choice topic could be kind of fun if you gave us we would like to hear about books that have, and then tell us what that would be in them. And we could look for stuff that would be fun. Sometimes we struggle to come up with topics for the podcast, not super often, but sometimes. I don't know, anybody final thoughts? There are other book tracking websites other than Goodreads. Goodreads is the only one that I use. Is Library Thing still around, or did it go away? At one point in time, there was Library Thing. I don't know if they're still there. And I read an article in Forbes or something. It was linked on Facebook. I don't read Forbes, but it was because it was about books and a book app. Now the name of it is completely gone. So this was really informative for you. Copper Books is a startup that's supposed to be opening up sometime, I think, in 2022. And it was this big write-up they've got venture capital and all this kind of stuff. I don't know, trying to be the next Goodreads, but better, apparently. I don't know. So
yeah. It'd be interesting to know if there is anything. So I know a few years ago, like probably if you go back probably 7 to 10 years ago, there were a lot of different options that were sort of coming on board. I think once sort of Kindle and all the ebook stores really opened up, then all the sort of apps around it started up. And I think Goodreads is the one that's lasted. But I'd be interested to know if people are using something different that they find more helpful for their personal reading, as opposed to somewhere where you put reviews that help authors and help publishers sell books. And I think that's probably the thing that's the hard part with Goodreads, is I think that there's that real salesy element to that, which probably to me as a reader isn't particularly attractive. Sure. Yeah, but if there's something that's sort of more, let's track your personal reading without everybody in the world having to know exactly what you're reading, I'd be interested in those type of things.
Excellent. It's called a notebook.
No, but you can't search a notebook and then it has to be like an ebook. And
That's true.
I don't know, but yeah, something that if you happen to lose your notebook, you've lost everything and it's not backed up anywhere. And
in my nightstand.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
all right. Other thoughts? Are we good? I think we probably.
I have no more thoughts.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Let us know if you plan your reading, how you track it, if you track it, if you like challenges. We just chat with us. We'd love to hear. Tell us why we're missing out if we're not doing something. And leave those comments on the YouTube channel or on our Story Chats Facebook page. You can find more information about the podcast at inspiromance.com/storychats. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. And make sure you're subscribed and you've hit the notification bell on YouTube if that's where you're watching, or on your podcast app of choice that you're subscribed to if that's how you're listening. And we will see you next week. In the meantime, don't forget to fall in love with a good book. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.